is now set on Deborah Nelson, Judge.
Please be seated. Good morning. We're on the record in case number 12 CF 1083A, State versus George Zimmerman. Everybody is here in place. All of the jurors are now ready, so we're going to begin with bringing in juror B7.
B7 is present, Your Honor.
Good morning. Please be seated. Sir, the attorneys are going to be referring to you by your juror number, B7, and they're going to start with asking questions. And first will be Mr. Delawanda. Yes.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
As Judge Nelson indicated, we're going to be asking you questions by virtue of your name. In terms of B7 will be your name today. Okay. You filled out the questionnaire, and I had some questions back as a result of that. From what I understand, you got some information from this case from NPR and the Orlando Sentinel and then local TV news. Do I have that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you recall what particular program on NPR? Was it the morning or?
It would have most likely have been the BBC News, the overnight.
Okay. And you recall what you heard about the case?
I think I've heard just references to it over the past year.
Okay.
If you have anything specific to ask,
I'm trying to
I understand.
probe your mind in terms of what you remember. And let's start at the very beginning. Your news information on this case would have been limited to those three sources, from what I understand, NPR, Orlando Sentinel, and the local TV news?
Those are the news sources that I consume my news from. I have seen references, links, other stuff to sources that I don't follow.
Sure. Did you do any internet surfing at all in terms of, either on, Facebook or other kind of stuff at all?
In terms of this case?
Yes, sir.
No.
Okay, so you're, I guess local news would have been the actual TV stations here locally?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you recall what particular TV station? Is there one you favor more than the others?
13, my favorite. And then maybe any local news, maybe during a television show, they'll do during the commercials coming up
Like
at
a break type? Okay. And are you a regular TV watcher in terms of the news, like at 6 or 6:30, or it's just infrequently?
It's very infrequent.
Okay. Now, the NPR, BBC, do you do that every day, or is it just...
My car radio is tuned to NPR, yes.
Okay. So would that be in the morning going to work, and then in the afternoon or evening coming back from work?
Yes, in the morning, when I typically go to work, it's the Diana Rean show.
Okay.
I cannot recall a specific instance of them discussing this case, but it may have happened in the last year.
And then you mentioned also that you've seen references on the internet, but you didn't read many of them?
No. Most of them were links to blogs and stuff that I find very good news sources.
If I were to ask you now what you recall about the case, what comes to mind?
There's a shooting.
Okay.
There's a fight that led to a shooting.
Okay. Anything else that comes to mind?
I know George Zimmerman was involved and Trayvon Martin died.
Okay.
I know Trayvon Martin was visiting relatives. And I know that there was they were talking early in the case about the stand your ground law and stuff of that nature.
Right. Anything else that comes to mind?
It seems like, well, I don't know if, like personally or just the facts, but it seems like my opinion of it seems like a lot of people have taken sides on it.
That a lot of people have taken sides on it.
And I find that inappropriate.
I'm sorry, you have a neutral view?
Yeah, well, I feel it's inappropriate for a situation like this to make it something that takes sides with.
Okay. So, if I understand you correctly, from what you've seen on TV or in the internet kind of stuff, or listened to radio programs, you have made it you have taken a position that on purpose you did not want to take a view. You thought it was inappropriate to take a position.
I didn't think it was inappropriate that I would take a position because I did not expect I would ever end up on a jury, obviously. But I definitely felt that I didn't like the way the news covered it. And
What about the news coverage did you not like?
it felt very speculative. I feel like not all the facts were there.
Okay. And did you feel it was speculative one way or the other? In other words, in favor of the defendant, Mr. Zimmerman, or in favor of the victim, Mr.
I felt it was both ways.
Okay, so you thought the coverage was biased one way and then also biased the other way.
And that's what I meant earlier when I said people were taking sides.
Okay. And you didn't approve of that, I gather.
No, I didn't. I felt it should be up to the jury.
Okay. So, in other words, you believe in the American system that what a trial is, what this is all about in terms of determination of guilt or innocence is here in the courtroom.
Absolutely, you should not be convicted in a court of public opinion.
Okay, all right. And so, in your watching of TV, did you focus, or let me restate that, did you listen to any of the news conferences in terms of commentators making comments about the case? Okay. What I'm trying to find out from you, sir, is your knowledge of the case. Was it purely news? In other words, Channel 13 reporters saying, today this happened, versus people after the fact commenting, either attorneys involved in the case or attorneys or other commentators saying this is what happened or this is what didn't happen?
The other commentators is what I set out to avoid.
Okay, so you on purpose avoided anybody commenting about the
Yeah, I
case?
do that with any news, like any sort of news, especially local news. If it happened on the other side of the world, but this is in my backyard.
And your knowledge of the case, was it also at the very beginning when it happened back in February of
Yes.
2012? And have you kept up with it just because you live in this community?
I kind of forgot about it until I heard on NPR the trial started the day of my jury duty.
Okay, so that kind of...
And I was like, oh.
How about when you got the summons, I think maybe 3 weeks ago or a month ago, did that say, hey, maybe I'll be on the jury?
No, I actually got the summons back in March.
Okay, wow.
I was very busy at work, so I asked for a postponement. And then I did get, but I did not know that. I assumed that the jury had already been selected at this point if it was going on.
So you originally had been summoned to potential trials in March, and then you got it postponed, and then you ended up, this is the fallback position, I guess.
Yeah.
I got you. Have you kept up with the court proceedings in terms of what happened in court in front of Judge Nelson?
No.
And I gather from your questionnaire, when you listen to whatever facts you listen to, you did not on purpose form an opinion?
No, I didn't hear enough. It felt like there were too many unanswered questions. Like I would have to read the police report, which you don't get in the media. You get quotes or like little parts of it.
So even on the limited knowledge that you obtained from the news, you on purpose did not form an opinion?
I don't know. On purpose it
You
was.
just did not? You didn't have enough information?
Yeah.
Okay. Were you leaning one way or the other or not?
No.
Okay. So in other words, you come with a blank slate right now.
Yeah, I would say that, yes. More, yeah.
Did you talk to anybody? Forget about the news right now. Have you talked to people in the community or family and say, hey, this is what this case is about, and then they gave you their 2 cents worth?
Absolutely.
Have you done that? I mean,
Absolutely.
I'm assuming it's a normal thing to do.
Yeah, it comes up in conversation amongst family and colleagues and friends.
Let's, if we could, divide them up in terms of just family.
Okay.
Who in your family have you talked about, and what have they told you about the case?
My father.
Okay.
My father seems very interested in the case.
I'm sorry.
My father appears very interested in the case.
He's like into it.
Well, he's retired. He spends a lot of his time watching the news.
I got it. So he's got a lot of time to do. What did he tell you about the case?
He told me. I think that's kind of what I know about the case. He is like me. He hasn't taken sides. I think if anything, he feels that inappropriate things were done by Mr. Zimmerman, and unfortunately, someone died. And he doesn't feel that there's any like real malice, but he feels that there was a fight. And from the way I interpreted it is that Mr. Zimmerman was losing the fight and pulled the gun.
Did that in any way sway your feelings about the case? What your dad told you?
I certainly respect what my father tells me. It didn't. It didn't sway me. I wasn't at one point where now that you bring that up.
Okay. Who else have you talked to? You don't have to name everybody, but just kind of get a flavor for who you talked to. And
I talk at we chat at work certainly,
sure.
But mostly what we talk about is sports and video games.
There's another world out there besides this case.
Yes. So this case has rarely come up. I know at one point someone was talking about the case, and I remember saying, like, it's ridiculous, just let the jury decide.
Do you remember what that person, I'm assuming that person was at work, do you remember what this person said?
No.
And there have been people that have been vocal one way and the other. Was this person vocal, like, in Zimmerman's favor?
I think it may have been, like, about three of us, and I think maybe one person was on one side, the other person's on the other side. But all of us are kind of like, well, we don't really know. There's not a lot in there. It's not a lot.
And I gather when this discussion was had among, the two different people and yourself, would you say you were in the middle?
Yeah.
In terms of opinions? Or?
Yeah, I compared to them, I didn't have an opinion. I was like, yeah, it's tragic.
Okay.
I'd like to know more.
Now, as you read in the questionnaire, and more importantly, what the judge is going to tell you, under the law, people bring in whatever they've absorbed from the media, etc., and they bring in opinions. And the law requires you to be able to set that aside and make a decision only on what happens in this courtroom. Do you feel at this time that you would be able to do that?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. How about if you're sitting in a chair, in the jury, and you listen to the evidence, and you listen to, whatever come out as evidence, and you go, hold on. But, on BBC, they said, it comes to mind, which is a normal thing. Can you agree that you would have to set that aside, whatever the commentator or commentator said?
Absolutely.
Do you think you could do that?
Absolutely.
And I think you mentioned that you kind of just saw references on the internet. Did you at any time when you were going on the internet, did you go on any websites in particular?
Facebook.
Okay.
I go to fark.com as a news aggregator.
Sure. Okay.
That's kind of where
it's got a variety.
It does. So that way I'm not relying. I don't get all my news from one source, but really when I'm first place I go for news is something like ESPN.
Okay. So you have not got to any particular websites dedicated to this case, either pro the state or pro the victim or pro the defendant? Or have?
Yeah, I would see links to those. And if you're familiar with fark.com,
yes,
the link kind of gives you an idea of what you would be getting into.
And so you on purpose avoided those?
I was like, well, I'm not going to waste my time with that.
Okay. Let me have another drawing. Thank you very much, sir.
Mr. O'Hara?
Yes, thank you. Morning, sir. How are you? It may have just become clear to you, but what we're focusing on today is what you may have heard about the case in the past. Or maybe other times we'll talk to you more about other issues, but I just want to focus on what we call pretrial publicity.
Okay.
Mr. Giuliani asked you about newspapers and internet and TV stations. I want to spend some time on that, okay? You had said that your go-to station on TV is 13?
It's the station that when I turn on my TV, that's what it automatically defaults to.
Another Bright House customer?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the default.
So if you then would watch the news, would you generally watch it on 13?
Yes.
13 has in the past covered some of these proceedings. They would have a camera in the courtroom looking at what we're doing here. Did you watch any of those or notice them?
I don't recall ever seeing that on the news.
Okay.
I've seen no courtroom video of this particular case on television.
You've seen no courtroom video?
I've seen none.
Okay. And your go-to station on the radio then is NPR?
Yes.
Why?
Well, I like talk radio.
Okay.
Sports radio is kind of silly. And the other news stations play, very political type radio, which I'm not interested in. I want to hear the news and the stories of the day.
And NPR does it more on a national and sometimes international basis?
Yes.
Is that more of a focus of yours than the local?
NPR also has local shows too. Sometimes on my drive home, I think once a week, they have a show where they talk about the history of Florida.
You talk about, I'm sorry,
The history of the state of Florida.
Tell me a bit more about the news program that you listen to in the morning.
So generally, it's in the morning. It's the Diane and Maureen show. It's a sort of a panel show. They take a topic of the day all over the world, and they may very well have one point done a show on this case. And she'll have someone from the left, someone from the right, someone from a university or a newspaper, and they kind of go around and have they just talk about the issues.
And were there any times at all that you recall that show spoke about this case?
As I said earlier, I don't remember if it has. I don't remember hearing one, but it's probably likely. I don't always go to work at the same time every day, so sometimes I miss the show entirely. And I have a 10-minute commute to work anyway. So.
Okay. Don't catch much of it. No
I
matter
don't
what.
catch much of it.
You did mention that what was the first time that you heard anything at all about this case?
Yeah, I guess it must have been really big news when it happened. It must have been on the front page of the Sentinel,
Okay.
of the Sentinel's website. I don't have a subscription.
I was going to ask you. I thought you said sometimes you get your news from the
It's
Sentinel.
from the Orlando Sentinel's website.
The website?
Yeah.
And is that something that you do as a habit?
I used to, but they put up a paywall, so now if you spend enough time on it every month, they start trying to make you pay money. And so then I just close it and I go to ESPN or something, or go back to work maybe.
Give you a tease of the information and what
Yeah, you can go to the front page, click on an article, and maybe you can get through about 3 sentences before they kick you back out to the front page of the banner saying subscribe to the website.
Okay. How long ago did you stop doing? How long ago did they require that? And
Seems
you
like
stop?
about a year ago, maybe. Yeah, it's been a while since I've really gone to that website, so I haven't really gotten any local news from the internet much.
This case has been active. The event occurred in February of 2012, so it's been active a little less than 16 months or thereabouts. So do you remember looking at the Orlando Sentinel website during the first few months of 2012, where you would have had an opportunity to read more of it than lately?
I'm sure I did read the initial articles about
Okay.
it.
Would you then have, in addition, read the articles specific to this case?
I would think so. Yeah, that was just right when it was happening, and there was a lot of questions out there, not a lot of facts.
Tell me what stands out the most to you of what you knew about the case early on.
It seemed to me that it was a lot of discussion about the stand your ground law.
Okay. Tell me what you remember from the conversation wrapped around that law.
As it relates to this case,
Well, let's just tell me what it is that you remember hearing or what you remember.
I remember when the law was being proposed
Okay.
and debated, and I don't remember if it was enacted by referendum or by the legislature. I certainly remember the controversy over the law being put on the books. I don't remember how long ago that was. It wasn't that long ago.
Presuming for these quick questions, that it was several years before this event, maybe
Right,
as far
it
back
was.
as 2005.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I don't want to talk specifically about your views on that during this time. We may have another opportunity to do that. What I am focused on is to the extent that you've read something in the news, even before February, this event that is now in your mind about the Stand Your Ground law. I'd like you to talk to me about that. So what do you remember about what you heard about the Stand Your Ground law?
Well, when we're talking about my memories, it's hard for me to differentiate what I remember reading and what I know about it.
It's okay, just tell me what are your thoughts about, particularly what you remember seeing and hearing, thoughts about that law.
Well, I thought this seemed like, I guess, the debate over the law was it a necessary law? Is self-defense already covered in Florida law? Is it necessary for us to take the law further?
Okay. That's fine. That's fine. The one question we could ask every juror and then stop is whether or not you can be fair, impartial, put aside what you have outside the courtroom and just listen here. I'm going to modify that just a touch to ask you whatever you think Stand Your Ground is. And for that matter, whatever you think self-defense is. If you were to listen to the facts of the case, the judge is going to instruct you. She's going to actually read what we call jury instructions, telling you what the elements are and what the defense elements are. My concern is that whatever you brought to you here today, as intense or partial as that might be, if you were told that you had to follow the law, apply the facts of the law, would you be able to do that rather than use what you remember your understanding of the Stand Your Ground law to be?
I believe I can. I have served on a jury before.
Okay.
And that is exactly what happened.
And you probably went through a process similar to this.
It wasn't quite as...
yeah, I guess not.
But yes, I do remember the proceedings. The laws were clearly explained to us. And we took the evidence. We compared it to the law. Was the law broken? And that's how our verdict was.
And you understood what the judge advised you had to do to come back with a lawful verdict in that case?
Yes.
You were able to accomplish, not the verdict itself, but you were able to listen to the judge, understand why he or she told you to do what you did, that you did it?
Yes.
Great. When you said also that your initial knowledge of the case was that a lot of people have taken sides,
Right.
tell me what you mean by that.
There seems to be a lot of people that feel Mr. Zimmerman shot Mr. Martin, or followed him, attacked him based on his race. And then on the other side, there's a lot of people that think, it seems to have the opinion that Mr. Martin was some sort of thug that was looking for a fight. And I'm kind of like, well, how do you know these things unless you know these people?
Do you fall on one side or the other of that
No.
argument or positioning?
No, I haven't heard enough of the case. I find it kind of offensive that people would, especially would say something like that about a dead man or someone who's been through what Mr. Zimmerman has.
Do you think it's appropriate that we're questioning you and telling you that you shouldn't use media influence in a courtroom?
I think it's extremely important.
Okay. If you did sit on the jury and another juror said to you, well, I didn't hear about this part. They never said this, but I'm telling you, I remember this happened.
Right.
What would you do?
I would certainly point out the judge's directions. I pretty much, I believe, from what I remember, covered that. The jury is only allowed to consider what's presented in the courtroom as evidence in the trial.
I may have asked you this. Tell me if I did. I apologize, because I think I did. Now that I'm about to ask it again, was there any one thing about this case that just stuck out in your mind as being the most significant point about the case from everything you've heard about it before you walked in here today?
Actually, you didn't ask me that question because I haven't understood why this case has gained such national attention. It seems like this is something that probably happens rather often.
Okay. And if I then asked you, all told, and I'm not going to ask you the particular events, but all told, how many inputs have you had about this case? How many times have you heard from the media, and how many times have you heard from other people about the George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin event?
That's a tough question.
Mm-hmm.
You said it was in 16 months. I would put it in the range of 40 to 60 references.
Okay. So maybe a few times a month. Is that where you're getting that guesstimate from?
Yeah.
Okay. And it sounds like some of that was from the media, not much. Some was also work, and some was also your dad.
Yeah, I would say mostly it's from the media. It's definitely not something that's come up in conversation very much.
Okay. I want to talk to you about your conversations with your dad just a little bit more. And one thing that caught my attention was you said you respect your dad and you're going to respect his opinion. Mm-hmm. Okay. So did he have, I asked you a question to yourself, if you had to put yourself on one side or another of that positioning, George Zimmerman did this for a reason, Trayvon Martin was this type of person, whatever that might be. Right. What side do you think your dad would fall on?
I believe I answered this the other guy. I feel like his opinion is that there was a fight that could have been avoided, that Mr. Zimmerman instigated, but he doesn't feel that alone makes him guilty of murder.
Let's fast forward for a moment and say that you're sitting on the jury and you hear evidence that conflicts with your father's thoughts about the case.
Right.
One, what do you do about that?
Well, I would take the evidence over my father's opinion.
Okay. Two, you okay with going back home and telling him that?
If
he says something like, hey, I thought I told you that this thing didn't have to happen, or whatever he tells you.
I assume you're talking about after the trial is over. Unless I was instructed that I could, I would tell him, well, this is what we were showing in court.
Right. But you would be okay with, because my dad was never wrong until I was 17, then he was wrong for 10 years, and he was never wrong again. Presuming that's similar with your dad? Somewhere around there?
Well, until the part where he was never wrong again.
So you're still working through that. I worked through that at about 27, so you maybe...
My father, he's a very moderate guy. He really does. He doesn't have like one position on everything.
But you would be okay with, in effect, disagreeing with him? Not even disagreeing with him, but just deciding a case based upon the facts here and not on what he thinks was the way to do it, but what he thought before he heard everything.
I take his advice, but that doesn't mean I always follow it.
Okay. You also mentioned that you spent some time on Facebook. Any conversations or back and forth on Facebook specific to this case?
No, I just scrolling through and I see links from someone I may work with, or someone I knew in high school or something that says, there's an article and whatever their opinion may be.
Mr. Delaronda had asked you whether or not you had visited any sites specific to this case. I think you said no.
I didn't know if there were sites specific to this case.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to prompt it with a whole bunch of different names, but there are some websites out there. There are some petitions that have been signed on one side or the other.
Right.
Have you visited any of those sites and signed any petitions?
No, I didn't even know that.
Have you ever acknowledged your support for one side or the other, like in a rally or a support meeting or anything like
No.
that? You mentioned that Sanford's your backyard. Any concern that you have handling a case that you now know is of this significance and deciding it, and then going back to your backyard and dealing with whatever might happen based upon the result of the case?
Yes, yeah. Last night, after I came home and I realized what jury duty I was here to serve, what case it was. I was concerned. What if I am chosen and we make a decision, and a friend of mine, maybe even a family member, is very strongly opposed to the verdict that we rendered.
Right.
Like would I alienate that person?
Sure.
How would I handle that?
So how would you handle it?
I don't know. I would certainly say, well, this was the evidence. These were the facts. This is what we saw in court. Tell them what I can tell them. But I understand a lot of people, once they make up their mind's made up, or they have a certain ideology that everything they hear, they classify into the spectrum of that ideology and never leaves.
You had said a little while ago that tragedies like this seem to happen more often, and this one has gained some particular significance.
Yeah. Well, national significance.
Sure.
I think, since it's, around the area I live, that it's significant for me, but national media, world media, I'm not
Tell
really-
me how you think that exposure or pressure is going to affect you if you're asked to sit on the jury and make that decision.
As long as my anonymity is preserved.
Okay.
I certainly would be concerned if who I was, my identity was
Okay.
become public.
So let me ask it a different way.
Okay.
Let's just say that I was calling you John Doe right now, your real name,
Right.
instead of what we're trying to do to protect some anonymity. Let's just say that we didn't do that.
Right.
Now, what's your concern?
Is the trial, is the media in the trial? Are they?
Yes.
Yeah, that would concern me.
Tell me how.
Well, the same way when I mentioned how it might alienate friends and family, but I would be afraid that it might anger strangers. Someone may retaliate.
What are you going to do if we do select you, and under my premise that your name cannot be held anonymous? How do you handle that?
What choice would I have?
Here's my concern, and I want to see if you can address it. I'm wondering whether or not that pressure that we're now talking about is going to cause you either to have a difficult time making a decision, or making a decision based upon those external pressures rather than the facts of the law?
Oh no, it wouldn't affect my decision making. It's not like something I was scared of. I was just more of some concern,
So now, since we're talking about this subject, you look at the facts, you look at the law, and you say, you know what, there's no self-defense here, Joe Zimmerman is guilty.
Right.
You're okay going home to your backyard and dealing with that.
Yeah.
And if you look at the facts of the case and you say, this is self-defense, whatever other reasons you decide that Joe Zimmerman is not guilty, knowing that that may polarize people, you're going to be okay to do that, ignoring those pressures that we've now spent a few minutes talking about.
Yeah, well, at that point, the decision would have been made, right? It wouldn't.
Well, you're making it. In my scenario, you're making a decision as to whether or not. Can you do that?
No, I'm talking about the decision in the trial setting, how I feel about what, how I personally feel after the trial, I wouldn't know until that moment were to come.
Okay.
I don't think I could speculate on that.
Great. Can you commit, though, that you're not going to let those external pressures affect your job as a juror?
Yes.
I'm just going to end with a question or two about your dad again, if I might. Obviously, you respect your dad and his opinion. Anybody else that you've talked to this about, whose opinion you respect, that has an opinion regarding Mr. Zimmerman's actions?
No.
I'm going to just have a moment. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. When counsel's ready, please approach. Good morning, Juror B35. That's your name for now, okay? We're here to ask questions about the survey that you filled out yesterday, and Mr. De La Ronda is going to start.
Please support. Good morning. My name is Bernie Del Riota, and as Judge Nelson indicated to you, we're going to be calling you B35, if that's all right. I've had an opportunity to read over your questionnaire, and I had some questions as a result of that. But what we're trying to find out at this time, it's very limited just to publicity in terms of what you've heard about the case or read about the case. So I'm going to delve into that if we could. You said you've heard about this case from various media sources, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. And you also said from friends and relatives.
Yes.
And then also local news and I guess Fox News too?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is the Fox News that you're referring to the national Fox News, like,
Yes.
Okay. And then you also said the radio.
Yes.
Okay. So let me take those all one at a time. The local news that you would have focused on or heard about this news, do you recall what particular stations?
Usually West TV,
I'm sorry, West
WSH.
Okay. And then how about anything else in terms of local news? Newspaper at all? Or?
No, I don't do newspapers. Just mostly West.
All right. And then the national news would have been the national Fox News?
Yes.
Okay. And any particular programs or just news? They have...
I watch like the morning news they would have, and I watch Sean Hannity at
Okay.
night.
All right. No Bill O'Reilly at all? Or?
I watch some of that too.
Okay. Then you also mentioned friends, just like neighbors or people at work or just
Right,
close
just
friends?
conversational stuff with friends and people at work.
Okay. And then family, immediate family or just...
Immediate and extended family.
All right. And I gather from all these various sources that you obtained information, you have not formed an opinion one way or the other. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Tell me, if you could, from the local news, as best you can, what you recall hearing about the case.
Basically, they were trying to say that that I guess Mr. Zimmerman killed Trayvon Martin, sort of a racial thing, and that he was out of bounds by following him and tracked him down and things like that. Try to make it racial.
Right, and I apologize for not asking it this way, but that would have been at the very front end when you first heard about
Right.
the case? Is that correct?
Yes.
And how did you feel about the news being portrayed it that way? What I'm trying to ask is distinguishing between, just fact news or opinions that sometimes is interjected right after the news. Do you understand what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, about trying to portray it as far as being racial.
Yes.
I didn't see it that way because I didn't know. I don't know, but I can read the man's mind and tell whether he decided he wanted to kill the guy because he's black or what. I just figured that maybe they met at a wrong point in time and things went wrong and they disagreed and something happened and I don't know what happened because I wasn't there, but I don't think it was racially motivated.
Anything else about the first impressions from the local news that you obtained that we would be asking you about? Anything else you remember specifically about facts of the case?
No.
Okay. Then you mentioned national news. Let's talk about it. And is your information about this case in terms of nationally just limited to Fox News?
Pretty much.
Okay.
And I watched a little CNN too.
Okay, so let's talk about Fox News. You mentioned, would that have been from the morning or from Sean Hannity or both?
A little both.
Okay. The morning, what do you recall in the morning? And I gather you watched I can't remember her name, there's a woman and then there's two guys in the morning.
Yeah, I forget her name, the blonde haired lady.
Right. Okay, what do you recall hearing about the case in the morning news?
Almost the same thing, so they were trying to not make it seem to be it was a racial type thing. It's trying to say that maybe the gentleman needs to have a fair shake before he wants to start making all these opinions and start assuming that a person was guilty because they think that maybe it might happen this way or that way when they weren't there.
Okay. And how did you feel about that?
Almost the same. Pretty much almost the same. I figured the man needed to have his day in court and see what happens and let the chips fall where they may. If he did viciously do what they say he did, then he deserves to be punished for it. If not, then we got to let him go.
Okay. And in other words, you believe in the concept of Fox News, fair and balanced, in other words.
Well, I just believe in a man is innocent until proven guilty.
Okay.
Whether
You
Fox
believe
News says-
in the Constitution in terms of presumption of
Absolutely.
innocence.
That's right.
Okay. Because you haven't heard any of the facts.
Right. I wasn't there and I didn't see the tussle go down.
Okay. All right. Now, you mentioned Sean Hannity. What do you recall? Because Sean Hannity, while he covers news, is more opinionated. Would you
Yeah,
agree?
it's real opinionated.
Okay.
Yeah, he's
All
kind of
right.
out there.
He's on one side of it. Would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because I watched Sean Hannity too. What do you recall hearing about this case about Sean Hannity?
Well, I saw a lot of the folks there on television, and I think one of the things that sort of stuck in my mind was, I forget the lady's name, but she had this pink hat on with pink suit. She's one of our senators, I think, and she made a statement as if Trayvon was hunted down like a rabid dog and shot. I said, that's out of bounds. But we don't know we weren't there. All we know is the tapes and what we heard. We don't know how that happens, and I really didn't like that.
Okay.
But that's the way, and that sticks in my mind the most.
Okay. Anything else about Sean Hannity that you recall hearing about this case? I'm not allowed to, doing this proceeding or any proceeding really, to tell you what came out.
Yeah, they're
And
talking
I'm
about
trying to pro from your mind.
Yeah, they were
as
talking
best
about
I
the
can.
NBC tapes, how they voiced over or took off the part where I guess Mrs. Zimmerman was talking on the phone to the dispatch lady, and she said the part about, I think he's black. They make it seem like it was racial. And they said on the news that was edited out. And that stuck in my mind. And let me see what else. They were saying that a lot of the pictures of the young man that was killed that day were not up to his regular age, I guess. They were showing younger pictures to make it, I don't know, to make it seem as though he was younger than he was. I don't know what it looked like. I've never seen it, but those are the pictures that I saw. But I don't really know if that was true or not. But those three things are what stuck out the most on that.
Any other pictures or any other interviews that Mr. Hannity conducted, if he did, that stand out in your mind that you recall about this case?
Those were the main ones, because I was kind of not wanting to be a racial thing, and when I saw the Reverend Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson get up there and march and do all this saber rattling, I wasn't with that, because I think we got more important things to worry about than this one case.
Did that alienate you against the Mr. Martin's in terms of him being the person that was killed in this case?
Not at all.
In other words, did that kind of put you in the Zimmerman camp because you felt that those commentators or whatever or people were doing something in your mind that they shouldn't have been doing? Do you understand
No, what it did actually was kind of made me upset because I guess trying to politicize it and make it into a racial issue when we don't know exactly what went down that day. I didn't like that, and I felt for the family and everything. Because if I was in the family issue, I probably went the same way. But I wasn't agreeing with the racial connotations, and they're trying to make it to be too flamboyant. I wasn't with all that.
All right. So, in other words, based on your feelings about that was inappropriate.
Absolutely.
You would not hold that against the state of Florida because we're prosecuting Mr. Zimmerman.
No, sir.
Okay. In any way whatsoever.
No, sir. I feel what you guys say is going to be the facts, and if that's where it was, that way it would be.
Okay. All right. And I'm assuming the opposite would also be true in the sense of keeping an open mind as to Mr. Zimmerman's guilt or innocence.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there any dispute about that in your mind?
I don't know. I listened to what they said on television. If Mr. Zimmerman, if he said what he said happened, then he has to be innocent. But if it's proven that he didn't, then he has to pay the price.
Tell me, if you could, expand on that a little bit. When you say he said what he said happened, what are you referring to?
As far as what they were saying that he was saying on television about he was the one on the tape being screaming for his life, and that Trayvon went for his gun, so he got the gun first and went in, and then he shot Trayvon, and about how he followed him, but the dispatch, I guess, told him to leave to go back. He was on his way back, and then Trayvon came from behind, I guess, and said, "Hey, whatever." They hit him, and the fight went down that way. Those things.
Okay. And you recall hearing about that in terms of Mr. Zimmerman when you were talking about what he said. Do you recall that being from recordings that were played about what he said, or was that just commentating?
Commentating, people talking about it.
Do you remember what commentator was talking about that?
Bill, Sean.
Okay, Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity. I know you're talking about it, just for the purpose of the record. Okay. Sometimes those first impressions are lasting impressions that you form an opinion at that time, other than you felt there was some inappropriate stuff done by Mr. Sharpton and Mr. Jackson. Did you form any other opinions about was Hannity being fair or not?
Not all the way. I didn't think so. I think he had his one side, and he was trying to get his opinion across, trying to keep it from being whatever he didn't want it to be. But it was mostly entertainment, just trying to get an idea of what was going on with
right.
the case.
And do you understand my question is, because I've watched Sean Hannity in terms of in this case in particular, he's one side.
Yes.
Do you not agree with that?
I agree.
And did that sway you in any way or bias you against the state side?
No.
As a result of Mr. Hannity's?
No, sir. Because that was basically his opinion.
Okay, so you don't take him as an authority like,
no, sir.
Man, I'm going to be on that jury, and Mr. Hannity said so, and
no.
That's the case.
No.
You can agree to set that aside.
That's right.
Okay, under the law, anything that you would have heard or seen on TV or read about, etc., the law requires you to take that outside the courtroom and only make a decision of actually what happens in the courtroom when all sides are present, the defense, the state, and the court, and obviously the jury. Can you agree to do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You also mentioned friends that you spoke the case about. Did they have opinions one way or the other?
Yeah, they all had one-sided opinions. I'll be the only one outside getting yelled in both ears for my opinion.
Okay. Were they pro Mr. Zimmerman or pro Mr. Martin's case, or
They're all pro Mr. Martin.
okay? Did that alienate you against them, or are you still friends with those people?
Well, we're still good. We're still good. But I can get my opinion across to them because they all believe one thing.
Right.
I'm trying to tell them.
Sure. And did you take the opposite opinion when those friends of yours were talking in favor of Mr. Martin's case?
No. I would just say maybe we'll look at the other side before we make a judgment.
Okay. Did they kind of argue with you about
Always,
that?
every time. So I stopped talking about it with them.
Okay, all right. And you mentioned family. Mm-hmm. Did your family, in terms of what opinions, if any, did they express regarding the case?
It was basically the same thing.
Were they pro?
All pro Trayvon.
Okay, all right. So, in terms of family and friends, were you the only one that felt the opposite, or?
As far as my experience so far, yes.
Okay, and I want to make sure I have a complete understanding and a fair understanding of what you're saying. Are you saying that you felt that Mr. Zimmerman, based on the facts that you heard on TV, was innocent or presumed innocent at that time, or what are your? In other words, they were expressing that Mr. Trayvon Martin was right. I'm assuming, right?
Absolutely.
And did you take the opposite extreme, or were you kind of in the middle?
Kind of in the middle, because I'm not sure if he's guilty or innocent. I don't know. I haven't seen the facts. Only what I saw on TV, and that kind of thing. You hear people talk, but I really don't know. And that was I was trying to tell people, hey, don't presume this man is guilty because you heard someone say he was, or you heard this happened. Let's find out. Wait for the facts to come out. And if I'm not on the jury, if I'm not on the jury, I want to still feel the same way. When the facts come out, and that's the fact, and that's what it's going to be. That's just what they make.
Did you feel, in other words, it was important to keep an open mind?
Absolutely, especially in a case like this.
Okay. At some point, you found out you were going to be on, at least potentially, you were going to be on the jury. You didn't know it was going to be this case, I assume, right?
No, I didn't know.
Okay. When you first got that summons, did you talk to any of your friends and say, "Hey, listen, I might be on that jury"?
No, I just talked to my wife. That was it.
Okay. Did she express an opinion about, like, "Oh yeah, now this is your opportunity"?
No, it was surprising because I hadn't been called for jury duty since I was 18 and back in college. And
Okay.
she went 5 or 6 times since we've been married over 27
She
years.
has been?
Yeah.
Well, thank God for her service.
Yeah. And I told her the day they had a report, and she goes, "Well, that's the day they're going to be doing the George Zimmerman thing." I said, "They already have that jury already." She goes, "No, they're going to start doing it now." I said, okay.
Okay. So you had no understanding you were going to be until, I guess,
Until yesterday.
Okay. You went home last night. Obviously, you followed judge's admonitions about
That's right.
not doing anything. Did anybody try to approach you at all, or your wife in particular, and say, "No"?
No, she knew. She didn't.
Now, you also mentioned, I guess, in your questionnaire, you talking about rallies. I guess did I read your? I'm trying to read your writing, and I apologize. I write terrible too.
What was the question? I could probably.
I stated I might have heard that it may have been. Oh, I'm sorry. Racially.
Yes.
Okay, motivated, or perhaps a misunderstanding between the two individuals.
Right.
Did I get that right?
Right.
Okay, so it wasn't rally; it was racial.
Racial, right.
Okay. Anything about, you mentioned Mr. Jackson or Mr. Sharpton. I gather you didn't agree with what they were saying or doing about the case. Is that accurate? Or?
I don't agree in them rallying all the African Americans together over one case when we have 47 blacks getting killed in one city on a constant basis all the time. We don't march about that, but we'll march about an individual case if it seems to be racial. So we will march when it's our own kids being killed by our own kids. That's why I have the problem with that.
So it did not alienate against the state or against Trayvon Martin?
No.
Okay. It was more that what they were doing?
Yes, they were rattling and trying to build their own agendas.
Okay. Now, did you do any research on your own? I know you've been exposed to Fox News and local and all that. Did you say, "Oh, let me find out a little bit about this case on my own"? Let me go to different sites, pro Zimmerman and pro Martin, and make a decision?
No, I didn't do any of that stuff. I was just conversation with people, friends, and watching television. I didn't go that deep into it.
I know we talked about Fox News. Did you think the local news was favoring one side versus the other?
They seem to be a little more on Trayvon. The only news source that was not all pro Trayvon was Fox. All the others I was watching, CNN, MSNBC, they were all more or less on the side of Mr. Martin.
So you just don't go to the what people may refer to as more conservative. You go to all different areas, I guess, in terms of some people may refer to CNN as liberal. I'm not saying that it is or isn't.
Right.
But so you were getting a varied views, I guess?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was that on purpose?
Yes.
Okay. And would that have been only to this case, or do you on a regular basis, look at or watch Fox and CNN?
On a regular basis. Some interesting, I'll try to look at both sides and see.
Okay. Do you focus more on Fox News versus CNN?
No, almost the same.
Okay. And on CNN, do you watch any particular program that, what I'm talking about, it's not just news, I'm talking about commentators. Do you see, what is it, AC or Anderson Cooper? Or?
I've seen some of Anderson Cooper and mostly the regular news that's on CNN. And what's that blonde-haired lady's name that has that show? I forget her name. That's on
CNN?
Yes. Short.
More of a Fox, but anyway.
I've watched her a couple of times, but I forget her name.
All right. Do you always believe what you hear on TV or reading the newspaper?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you always believe that the news gets it right?
Not all the time, no.
Okay. And in terms of the news, the local coverage or the national news, Do you recall any commentators specifically, forget about the national commentators like Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, or Anderson Cooper. I'm talking about lawyers talking about the case. Do you recall the names of any lawyers?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you recall any of the lawyers in this case talking about the case in terms of the things you saw on TV or read in the paper?
Just some of the guys over there when they would do their regular, I guess, briefings that they did.
Okay. And you talking about Mr. O'Mara or
Yes,
somebody
sir.
else on this side? Did you watch any of those?
Yes, sir. Some of it, yes.
Okay. Did that, first of all, what do you recall being said by Mr. O'Mara or somebody else on this side over here?
I guess they wouldn't really say much. This was a while ago, so I can't recollect
Was
exactly.
it towards the beginning? Or?
Yes.
Okay. And you don't have any recollection of what they said?
Not much.
Okay. Did you feel that the state also should have been commenting about the case on a daily basis?
Not really. No, no, not really.
All right. Did that sway you in any way in terms of hearing commentary from the defense attorney in the case?
No, sir.
Okay. Did you agree to keep, or while you were listening to it, did you say, well, hold on, there's two sides to every story?
That's right.
Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Did you watch any of the proceedings themselves in terms of what was going on in court? Since you live in the community, did you either while it was being streamed live or later on in the evening, get the rundown in terms of what had happened in court?
Not really. Just stuff like, I guess the bail. The money issue for attorneys and
Okay.
not getting a bail, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Did you form an opinion as a result of hearing that?
No.
Do you have any doubt in your mind as you sit here today whether your perception or consideration of the actual evidence in the testimony or law might be affected by your prior experience in terms of media exposure?
No, sir.
At all? Nothing? Is that correct? If I grab a moment to... You mentioned, and I apologize, Your Honor, I may have a few moments. You mentioned having seen the defendant, Mr. Zimmerman. Did you see him on TV?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall in what settings you would have seen the defendant, Mr. Zimmerman?
Yeah, I guess when he got arrested, they showed his head, the back of his head, and going into the jail.
Anything else in terms of him appearing on TV? Did you?
No, I guess it was mostly that in the early years, in the early part.
Okay. Did you watch anything after that on national news or on local news?
Just more or less people talking about it on television, not really showing a whole bunch of Mr. Zimmerman after that, other than the same pictures. Of him
Okay.
going
Would
to
it
court.
have just been pictures or would it?
Video.
Video.
Going into the jail.
Okay. Anything else? This is what I'm trying to probe from you at this time as best you can recall.
Right. That was, let me see. I remember him when they walked him into the jailhouse and they showed the pictures of his head. And they would keep showing the picture of his face when they were talking about the case.
Okay.
But that was pretty much it.
Did you form, or let me ask you this way, what impressions did you get from those video pictures? Did you form any impressions? I know you stated you don't have an opinion about the case. I'm saying, what were your impressions? I mean, everybody, I'm assuming, has impressions. Maybe you didn't have any.
When I saw the scars on the back of his head, I didn't know that. I figured he was getting a pretty good beating.
Okay.
And somebody had to defend themselves. It was pretty. I figured it was a pretty rough fight.
Okay.
On both sides, I guess.
Right. Did you see any pictures of Trayvon Martin at all? Do you recall seeing?
Just the pictures that they showed, I guess with the hood on, and I guess one when he was a younger boy.
Okay.
That's
all right. What were your impressions in terms of him wearing a hoodie?
no big deal. I wear hoodies too. He must have been cold.
Okay. Anything else that you can recall now about pictures or videos or interviews of anybody in the case that you recall at this time that you would have seen on TV?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. West.
Morning, sir.
Good morning.
My name is Don West, one of the attorneys for Mr. Zimmerman. If you care for water or something like that, let us know.
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. We only have the information that was in the questionnaire that you prepared and then what you said here today. So I wanted to follow up with a couple of things. You indicate that you're self-employed.
Yes.
What kind of work do you do?
Well, I own some houses and some vending machines. I pretty much handle those, and that's it,
Kind of a passive income?
pretty much.
So it would not cause you a particular hardship to sit on the jury?
No, sir.
Be able to maintain your businesses and still be able to see this through, whether it's 4 or 6 weeks, what have you?
That's right.
And that would include, should the jury be sequestered?
That's right. Yes, sir.
Do you have children?
I have one son.
How old?
He's 20, going on 21 in September, and he's a student up in Tallahassee.
Does not live at home with you?
No, he doesn't.
You talked about being in discussions with friends and family members regarding this case. Certainly, if people take different sides, it makes for a more lively discussion. Has your wife specifically commented to you about how she feels regarding the case?
She wasn't really sure either in the beginning. She thought he may have done it the way they say it went down as far as him, killing, but she wasn't with the racial connotations either on that.
So at this point, are you and she somewhat aligned
Yes.
in that sense?
Mm-hmm.
When you have the lively discussions with those that aren't, are you talking about siblings or co-workers or...
Some co-workers and sometimes, like last 4th of July, we got together with I have a big barbecue at my house every year. A lot of family members from both sides of the family come and talk about it. I'm always the one in the middle. Always. But it's mostly all, mostly family, very few co-workers. Because the only time I really have workers is when I have a Jackson office that I do at the beginning of the year, and I'll talk to a few people that work in my office about it, and they talk about it, kind of thing, but not a whole lot.
So for those that you socialize with and are related to at events like this, are you and your wife largely standing alone?
Pretty much.
And that all of those around you have pretty much made up their mind, and there's nothing you can do to talk them out of it?
I might be able to count on one hand the people that haven't made their minds up yet.
Mm-hmm. You had mentioned some things that happened that caught your attention that you thought were too far, public statements, and you mentioned a woman with a pink hat. Are you talking about a congresswoman?
Yes.
Frederica Wilson?
I think that's her name.
The hat's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
So that's the person we're talking about probably. Did you think that her comments were sort of inflammatory?
Yeah, I did. I really did. I didn't think it was necessary to say that the young man was hunting down like a rabid dog, and because no one was there but these two guys, and I don't believe he was being hunted. Maybe watched but not hunted, and just went crazy when they met. But I don't think it was intentionally being hunted down. And there's one more. What was the African American congressman name? I think it was. He goes, Trayvon was guilty of being some letters, MDB, some stuff like that. That's totally inappropriate. It was MDB, walking in the neighborhood while being black. I mean, that kind of stuff to me doesn't even be said. I'm not with that. I didn't like that.
Were you involved in the media watching what was being done instead in between the time of the event and when the decision was made to arrest Mr. Zimmerman?
Yeah, I was watching some of that. I was watching.
During the time of some of the demonstrations and rallies? Correct.
Yeah, I had some friends, matter of fact, some people who had prepared a taxi. They go, I'm going to go down to the rally. I'm going out to the rally. You coming to the rally? I'm not going to the rally. I said, because there's a rally in Chicago for 42 kids that got killed by our own people. Let's go to that rally.
Some of your friends, maybe even some of your family, may have attended the rallies?
I don't know if any of them did, but I do know some people that I socialized with as far as preparing their taxi. They would tell me, because we'd start talking, that they went down there to the rally.
Oh,
family
you do
members.
tax preparation?
Right.
Okay, so folks that you would come in contact
Right,
with?
right. I managed the Jackson Hewitt office at the beginning of the year.
Do you know anyone in your family or extended family or network of friends that signed petitions in support of?
No, sir, not that I know of.
Have you had occasion to listen to comments made in the media by legal representatives of Mr. Martin's family, Trayvon Martin's family?
Yes, their attorney, the guy.
Yes.
I watched when he was talking about how it's going to be suing and trying to prosecute Mrs. Zimmerman at the beginning of when it all happened.
Have you also heard members of the Martin family themselves speak?
Yes, I heard the father. I saw the father speak and the mother speak on television before. Now I understand where it comes from. Because my son, I feel the same way.
Sure. You can sympathize with anyone who's lost a child, I take it.
Right.
Did you feel that there was some attempt by the spokesperson for the Martin family to increase the racial aspect of this case, if there is one?
I didn't really think that he did as much as our so-called civil rights leaders did. I really didn't see it as much from him, though.
Do you feel that if you're a juror in this case and one of the members of the Martin family that might testify, Ms. Fulton or Mr. Martin, would you be able to give their testimony full and fair consideration?
Absolutely.
Is there anything that you attribute to them in the news that would in some way alienate you or affect your ability to consider their evidence?
Nothing.
At the same time, would you consider it with the same scrutiny and perhaps even skepticism as jurors are expected to have as you would anybody else?
Yes, sir.
It sounds like you are in some ways sort of used to defending yourself, at least in connection with this case. And in that you can take a position and stick with it,
Yes, sir.
and that you're not easily swayed by the opinions of others.
That's right.
Do you feel you could carry that quality into the jury room?
Yes, sir.
And if I understand what I think I'm hearing you say, and that is that you've heard comments, you've heard bits and pieces of what people claim are evidence, you've heard personal opinions about things all over the board.
Right. That's right.
And that, in fact, in your own family, in your own extended community, people almost across the board are saying this is racially motivated, that it was George Zimmerman's fault,
Yes.
and that George Zimmerman is guilty.
Yes, sir.
But you're able to separate yourself from that and make up your own mind?
Yes, sir.
And would that decision be made solely on the evidence you hear in the courtroom?
Yes, sir.
And because of that, that's how you're able to say, even though you have a flood of information available to you, that you still have no opinion.
That's right.
That you haven't given particular weight to any part of this. Some of it might check out, some of it might not, but if you sit on this jury, you will make your decision based just on what you hear in this courtroom as opposed to all of that other
Yes, sir.
stuff.
That's right.
All right. May I have 1 minute, please? Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you. And just stay seated for just a moment, sir. When counsel's ready, please approach. We'll be with you later on. If you'll please follow Deputy Jarvis, bring our next juror in. Please be seated. Good morning. You're going to be referred to as Juror B37. And we're going to ask you, or the attorneys are going to ask you some questions about your questionnaire that you filled out yesterday. Mr. De La Wonder, you may
Please
proceed.
report. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
My name is Bernie De La Riona, and as Judge Nelson indicated, we're going to ask you some questions, and limited, obviously, to the questionnaire you filled out in terms of publicity, that stuff. My understanding is when you wrote it here on the what your source was or what you had heard, that no real specific issues related to the case?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you've got, for example, names, place of crime, and names of people involved. I want to make sure I understand what you wrote here. When you say no real specific issues related to the case, you don't remember only the names?
Just a broad spectrum of names.
Okay. And then the place of the crime and the names of the people, that's all you really recall?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Your contact with the media exposure in this case, would it have been at the time when this happened back in February of 2012, or would it have been recently? Or
No, it was back when it first happened.
Okay. And do you recall your exposure to it? Was it local or national news?
Local news.
Do you recall whether it was the newspaper, radio, or TV?
It was TV.
Okay. And what particular station do you recall?
Probably NBC.
Okay. And how about, did you ever hear about it on national news at all?
National, as in like Today Show?
Yeah, or Fox News
Yeah,
or
it's
whatever.
probably Today Show is pretty much my source in the morning.
Okay, so
when
you stick to NBC locally and nationally.
pretty much, and it's the only time I kind of listen to it is in the morning when I'm fixing I have a lot of animals and I do all their food in the morning. So
Okay.
that's pretty much it. The newspapers are used in the parrot's cage.
I'm sorry.
Newspapers are used in the parrot's cage, not even read.
Do you read them before you
No,
put
I
it?
don't.
Okay. I'm not going to comment
It's a
on that.
lot better used in the parrot cage.
Okay, all right. So you have no use really for the newspapers?
I don't.
Okay, and why is that?
I just don't think they're truthful. I think there's a lean left or a lean right, politically.
Sure. And in terms of the newspapers, at least the local newspapers here, do you believe they lean one way or the other in terms of lean left?
I don't know. It's
You
been
don't-
so long since I ever even read one. The only time I see them is when I'm putting them down on the floor.
Okay. How about from NBC standpoint in terms of the news? What do you recall other than the names? Anything right now? Now you've had some time to think about it, and what I mean by that is from Monday when you filled this out yesterday morning. Anything else kind of pop in your mind that you remember about the case?
Well, I remember the names.
Okay.
And I remember the issues in Sanford when they were having rioting.
Tell me what you remember about that.
That's pretty much it. Just that there was a whole lot of indiscretion and angry people and picketing people.
Sure.
And a lot of news media.
Okay. Now, we have the First Amendment, we have the Second Amendment, we got all kinds of amendments. How did you feel about, in terms of people having rallies around here? Did you form an impression based on that? Did you feel that was proper or not proper? What kind of things went through your mind?
But not really proper or improper. I mean, they can do what they can do as long as it's peaceful.
And did you think it was inappropriate what they did?
I think maybe it was overdone.
Okay, all right. As a result of that, did that impact you one way or the other to favor Mr. Zimmerman's side or the state side in terms of on behalf of Trayvon Martin?
Not really, because I think it's just an unfortunate incident that happened.
Okay. And I gather, based on your questionnaire, you have not formed an opinion in this case,
I have
correct?
not.
Okay. In terms of your exposure to the publicity or media aspect of it, on the radio, did you listen to it on the radio at all? Or
No, I don't listen to the radio,
Okay.
really.
How about on your internet surfing? Are you not
I
one of
don't do
those?
that either. I'm pretty much on the Candy Crush saga right now,
Okay.
trying to get to the next level.
Gotcha. All right. So you didn't do any, like Facebooking or anything like that in terms of particular to this case? right?
No, not at all.
Okay.
None.
How about, and you didn't do any research on your own?
No.
Okay, since you live in this community, at least in Seminole County, you didn't do any
I have no
research?
time to do anything other than
Okay.
feed my animals and sleep.
And how
Sometimes the
about,
sleep is rare.
okay, how about with friends? Did you have any discussions with friends, in the community about what was going on, about the case?
Not really, just that it was there.
Okay.
I mean, politics and news, and I just kind of
Stay
don't indulge
away
in
from
it.
that.
Yeah.
How about family? Did you have any discussions with any family members where they gave you opinions or they talked about
No.
the facts of the case?
Absolutely not.
So you're one of those individuals that just focuses on what you've got going on in your
I
life?
do.
They'll worry about any other external stuff.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because you normally don't get all the information, so how do you form an opinion if
So
you don't have the information?
you don't really trust the media in terms of being able to be accurate.
I do not, and I think it's that I don't know if there's any way they can control media hype like that.
Sure. Now, the media sometimes, especially now with all the TV stations and stuff, and even some might argue the newspaper aspect of it, sometimes besides giving the news, they also sometimes give opinions, and they have people giving opinions.
Mm-hmm.
Have you paid attention to any of that stuff?
I have not.
Okay. How do you feel about that, people giving opinions about facts of the case or anything like that?
It's media. I'm not a big fan. I mean,
Okay.
it's First
Now,
Amendment, but
and I know your exposure to this case in terms of the media aspect has been limited. Assuming you were to get on a jury and you're sitting in the jury and you're listening to the evidence and you hear, ABC, in terms of, one witness says ABC, and you go, hold on, now that I think about it, and I do remember, I wouldn't say the newspaper because that's left for something
Right.
else, but I do remember on NBC, something about this. My question is, in our mind, we have in our memories, we have stuff stored there, even if it's limited in terms of our exposure to this case. Do you understand under the law that you have to only rely on what happens in this courtroom, not what you might remember as you're sitting as a juror about what you had heard on NBC?
yes, sir.
Can you do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you can concentrate on the facts that actually come out in this courtroom and the law that Judge Nelson will give to you
Yes, sir.
in making your decision?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You got the jury summons. Obviously, the jury summons didn't say Zimmerman case, but it did say you were going to be a juror, right?
Exactly.
Upon receiving that, did you go, oh, maybe I will be on a particular case? Did you do any research about not just the Zimmerman case, but other cases that were going on to see potentially what you might be a juror for?
Not really, because I've been called 3 times, and pretty much I just come and sit.
Have you actually served as a juror 3 times?
I got called back for a jury, but then I was disqualified because I worked for a chiropractor, and it was a hit-and-run type thing.
Okay, all right, so... Have you kept up with any of the, even on NBC, have you kept up with any of the proceedings that are happening in the courtroom?
No.
None at all? Okay.
Since I've been called for jury?
No, I'm talking about at the beginning, when it happened back in February, and we're now in June, a year later, or more than a year later, I should say. Have you kept up with any of the proceedings that happened between February and June of this year?
No, sir.
Okay, you haven't watched any, because I'm just saying there would have been a local news
Right.
on NBC. You
Right.
would not have
No,
watched
sir.
any of that? Okay, you don't remember anything of happening at all like that?
No. I didn't even know what he was even charged with until I got here.
Is there any doubt in your mind about whether your perception or what you recall, and I know it's limited in terms of exposure in this case, whether that would factor in at all or interfere with you being able to sit as a juror and keep an open mind?
No, sir.
Okay, so as we sit here today, as you sit here today, I'm standing, you feel you can be fair in terms of publicity, that has not impacted you one way or the other, either in favor of Mr. Zimmerman or in favor of the state of Florida on behalf of Trayvon Martin?
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I have a moment, Your Honor. I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Mara?
Morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
How are you? As a sort of a parent, this is very limited. First time we'll talk to you is just going to be about what we call pretrial publicity, what you brought to the courtroom about the facts of the case or your thoughts about it. So we're going to be limited to just that. And it sounds as though you have a strong opinion about the media, which is to regard them with skepticism.
Skepticism, politics, skepticism, because you never get all the information. There's
Okay.
no possible any way that you can get all the information without it being leaned, skewed one way or the other.
How do you handle that when you do seek to get news?
I really don't.
Okay. Well,
Let my husband deal with that.
All
That's
right.
his deal.
Okay. Are there any sources that you look towards to get information about a subject that you want to find out about?
Probably Safari,
Just
Google.
a Google search.
and normally it's about animals of some sort or another.
Sounds like you have a number of
I
them.
have too many.
Too many. At least one parrot.
One parrot, one crow with one wing. He's like 15. I volunteered for rescue groups, bird, cat, and you wind up with animals.
Okay. How many altogether?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I have 3 dogs,
All right.
4 cats, and a couple lizards. I just rescued a lizard like a month ago.
Okay. Your service on this jury could run several weeks were you to be selected.
Yes, sir.
You got that, I think, from the questionnaire. And there's a chance that you would be sequestered, meaning that you will not be spending time at the house, but rather with the rest of the jury. How would that affect your household duties with the animals and everything else that you do at your house?
My husband already said that he would do it all. But I do have 2 daughters that would be backup.
Okay. So that part of it would be covered if you had to spend several weeks with us.
Yes, sir.
Anything else that we haven't talked about or that you didn't mention on the question talking about hardship? Anything else that you have going on that would affect your ability to deal with this case where you're asked to do it for several weeks?
Well, the hardship would be my boss's hardship for me not being there. But I'm not sure that's a hardship.
Okay.
I mean, it's dealable.
If you weren't there, he's got to deal with the fact that you're not there.
Right.
You would certainly have a job to go back to.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But he wouldn't like it.
And, okay. Are your family finances such that it would not cause a hardship that you couldn't get past were you to spend those several weeks with us?
No, because I would be paid.
You'd be paid through your work? You had mentioned that your knowledge of the case was just sort of early on, is that right? And more of a broad spectrum of names. If I asked you to tell me the most significant issue or fact about this case that you remember, what would it be?
Just that there was a death.
Do you remember who it was who passed away?
It was Trayvon Martin.
Okay. Describe him.
He was a boy of color, and I believe teenage years, older teenage, I believe. I don't even know how old he was.
Okay. And obviously shot by Mr. Zimmerman.
Yes, sir.
What do you remember hearing about Mr. Zimmerman back there in the beginning of it?
I just heard that he was involved in a scuffle. It was late at night, and the boy was killed.
Anything about those few facts that you had heard about that, tell me what you thought about that.
I thought it was very unfortunate that somebody died, but that's why you have a jury, and that's why you have a trial to prove innocent or guilt. It's just very sad.
And then you mentioned some concerns about the way it was responded to in the community. Is that correct?
Well, in the media.
Did you have concerns about the picketing or what was sort of happening as a response to Trayvon Martin's passing?
Not really concerned, because I'm not involved in any of it. And Sanford is kind of away from Oviedo, Winter Springs. I mean, I knew there was rioting, but I guess they had it pretty well organized.
You don't spend much time, you mentioned Safari, but you don't spend much time what people now call surfing the internet, just to see what's out there?
I don't have time.
Okay.
I really don't.
So when you go on the internet, it's for a particular purpose?
I'm looking for a recipe, or I'm looking for something.
Okay.
No news.
Have you ever gone to any of the websites, or any websites that are specific to this case?
No, sir.
There are petition websites and things like that. Have you ever signed a petition regarding this case?
No, sir.
Ever looked at any of that information on the internet?
No, sir.
And you said that you have a couple of daughters?
I have 2 daughters,
Okay. Their ages?
24 and 27.
Do they live nearby you?
One lives with us, and one lives just a little ways away, 10 minutes away.
Have you discussed this case, or even generally, with your husband?
I have not.
Not at all?
No.
Even when it was early on, when you were talking about some of the reactions to it, was that ever a point of conversation?
No, sir.
Any other people in the neighborhood, or your daughters?
No, sir. There was the other day at work, somebody came in, said that the trial was going to begin, and that pretty much was it. Because I got busy with something else.
You did mention at one point that you thought you heard that your default national program is the Today Show.
Yes, sir.
Did you say that you saw something about this case on the Today Show?
At the very, very beginning when it happened.
And do you recall what it was that you saw?
It was just it wasn't even an interview. It was just a news flash saying that there was a death and there was rioting in Sanford.
Okay. Primary concern that we have when we talk about what you bring is if we don't talk much about it now and something comes up later,
Yes, sir.
that which comes up later could affect how you look at the case or how you act as a juror.
Yes, sir.
So it sounds as though you've kept yourself, just the way you live your life, pretty isolated from this event. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
And that you don't have any thoughts in mind or predispositions about what happened that night?
No, sir.
Let's say that something came up. Mr. Dorianda, I think, approached this. Something came up where you did remember something. Remember something about the rally, or something about a conversation you had with a neighbor that we didn't talk about here today, but now you're sitting on the jury. How would you handle any conflict between that memory and the evidence that you hear in this courtroom?
Well, the evidence that I hear in the courtroom, I would presume to be true. If I had a conversation with someone else that I remembered, the facts are maybe not the facts.
If, let's say that another juror did the same thing while you were deliberating with that juror. You know how the process works? You take evidence, you listen to the judge, you find out what the law is, and they'll go back, and the jury will decide what happens.
Yes, sir.
No, I'm sorry, decide their verdict.
Right.
In that context, what if another juror talks to you and says, well, I heard about something else that I didn't hear in the courtroom. I remember I saw this on TV or read it on the radio, read it on the newspaper, or heard it on the radio, and I think this happened, even though it never came from a witness here. How would you react to that?
I would say it was media hype. I mean, you can't prove anything that you heard prior to this case.
One of the instructions that you're going to be told by the judge is that you have to decide only on the facts that you hear, competent evidence in this courtroom.
Yes, sir.
And that while we won't ask you to leave your common sense at the door, we actually want you to use your common sense. We can't let you bring outside evidence or knowledge or information inside. So would you be able to advise that the juror doesn't come from a witness stand, it doesn't get considered?
Yes, sir.
Though you have not talked much with your other family members, have your daughters or your husband just sort of downloaded on you their thoughts about the case?
No, sir.
No conversations at all?
None.
the judge is going to instruct you for you to be on the jury, not only is there a chance that you might be sequestered, but either way, that you cannot discuss this case with anybody during the time of your service.
Yes, sir.
You're going to be able to do that?
Yes, sir.
Even if your husband says, I think this about that.
No, my husband would be totally opposite. He would, no, I can't talk to you.
So he's not going to be the problem then.
Yeah, he even told me last night, he said, do not watch the news. You're not allowed to watch the news.
Okay.
I'm like, okay. So now he told me this morning that he'll tape the Today Show. I can watch it when I get home, but he'll have already edited it.
Great. So he's going to be an advocate.
It's a little over and beyond, but I'm saying I just won't watch the Today Show.
Sounds like he's willing to be an advocate on the court's behalf to make sure that you don't see anything you're not supposed to see.
Yes, sir.
Okay. If other people that you've spoken to about this case, friends or family, do you know whether or not they've made or have any opinion about the case?
I really haven't talked to anybody about the case.
And if I asked you for just a raw number of times that you've heard since what was the first thing you heard about this case?
On the Today Show.
Okay, that was it.
Uh-huh.
From that point all the way forward through today, if I asked you just total of how many times you've talked to anybody about it, added to the number of times that you've seen anything about it in the media, I include reading, internet, TV, radio.
The only thing I would have heard about the media, with the media, are blurbs about, popping in and popping out.
Okay.
And normally I'm half listening to that anyway.
So a gross number of inputs that came to you from people or media. How many do you think?
I have no idea.
Okay. Nothing, however, to really have any impact or influence on you?
No, sir.
Great. Thanks for the time.
You're welcome.
Stacy, please, when council's ready, please come forward. Please take Juror 37 to the 4th floor, and we're going to take a 10-minute recess. We'll be with you again shortly. Thank you. It's 11 o'clock. We'll be taking a 10-minute recess. Court will be in recess.